The morning began before light. Snow had packed itself against the door again, the way it always did after a hard wind. He pushed back the blanket, pulled on his coat, and felt the cold bite through the fabric before his hands even found the sleeves. The stove had gone low, just a dull red deep in the ash. He left it for later and took the shovel from its corner. The snow moved slow beneath the blade. Heavy but willing, he muttered to himself while working. Something about how winter always worked harder than a man ever could. When the doorway was clear, he stacked a few armfuls of wood inside, split 2 pieces clean and set them in the stove. The flame caught after a pause. Quiet but sure. The small crack of burning birch filled the room. Another day was waiting, same as the last. His hut stood on a small rise beside a frozen river, the kind that barely moved under the ice. The roof dipped in the middle, and the logs along the walls had shifted a little with age. When the north wind came, it found every crack, but the place held heat well enough. It had for years. Each day moved in the same circle: wood, water, food, and fire. He melted snow in a blackened pot, fed the mare a scoop of oats, and brushed frost from her coat until her breath stopped steaming. The mare was steady and quiet, used to the cold as much as he was. After that came the rest of it: cutting wood, knocking ice from the eaves, checking the traps near the tree line, tightening the sled ropes that froze stiff overnight. The air always smelled of smoke and pine, sometimes iron when it was too cold to breathe deep. He worked without rush. The hours filled themselves. Out here, there wasn't much to think about, only what needed doing. And then the next thing after that. 3 days had passed without a catch. The traps sat buried under new snow, and the fish jars were scraped clean. The cold had thickened, not just in the air but in his joints, the kind that made every bend of the knee feel heavier than it should. He'd started cutting the logs thinner so they'd last longer. Though the fire didn't seem to care, the mare was uneasy, pawing at the ground, chewing straw when the oats ran low. He kept count without meaning to, and wood, salt, oats, and thyme, all slipping a little each day. It wasn't danger yet, only the slow kind of shortage that wears on a man's patience more than his fear. Tomorrow he'd walk farther, down toward the river bend where the ice sometimes broke early. Not a plan, just what came next. Out here, there was nothing to wait for but weather. He left before sunrise. The air held still, the kind of stillness that waits for noise but never gets it. His boots sank with a muted crunch, the sound carrying no farther than his breath. The sled followed behind, creaking softly, loaded with the coiled net, the small axe and a few tools wrapped in cloth. The cold worked slow on his fingers, steady and deep, not sharp yet, but reminding him it would be. The path wound between dark pines. Their trunks stood silent, rimmed with frost. He knew each turn by habit more than sight. When the trees opened, the river stretched ahead, flat, pale, and solid. He stopped a moment to listen. Nothing but the rasp of his own breathing. At the edge, he cleared snow with the shovel, then swung the axe until the dull ice split. The blows sent faint cracks echoing across the surface. When the water showed black beneath, he crouched and let the steam brush his face. The smell of iron rose from it, sharp and cold. He lowered the net, weighted it with stones, and sat back on his heels. The rope felt stiff in his hands. He chewed a piece of frozen bread, slow, letting the work keep him warm. Minutes passed. The light thinned. He tugged the line, waited, tugged again. A faint wind crossed the river from the north, shifting the snow. That meant another storm coming. He packed the tools, tightened the knots, and gave one last look at the dark hole in the ice. Maybe something waited down there. Maybe not. Either way, he'd done what the day asked of him. When he pulled the net a final time, he felt the weight first, and solid, certain. The rope cut cold against his gloves, ice cracking where it bent. He leaned back, slow and steady, until the catch slid free of the water. 2 fish, broad and silver, stiff from the air. He stood a moment, breathing hard, steam lifting from his beard. He didn't call it luck. It was work that finally gave something back. He wrapped the fish in a strip of cloth and tied them tight to the sled. The wind picked up quick, dragging snow sideways across the river. He packed the tools without thought. His hands knew the order by heart. Then he started for home. The sled bit into the snow, heavy now with its small reward. He leaned forward into the gusts. Each step measured, the rope dug into his gloves, the strain warming his arms. The air was thick with moving snow, but he knew the way, by shape, by memory, by habit. The ridge came first, then the long stretch of birch. The light was almost gone. The world turned to shadow and wind. His legs burned. His breath froze white on his collar, but he kept the rhythm. Step, drag, breathe. He thought of the mare stamping her stall, the stove waiting cold. He pictured the sound of fresh wood catching fire. That small, certain crack that meant things were still in order. He didn't smile, but the thought stayed with him. It was enough to keep moving. Steady and straight through the snow. By dusk, the hut came into view through the snow. Dim, steady, exactly where it should be. The mare stood by the fence, head low, frost along her mane. She snorted softly when he passed. He brushed her flank with his glove, knocked the ice from her tail, and set down a pail of water. Then he spread a layer of hay, rough and dry, and watched her start to eat. Inside, the air was cool and flat. The fire had sunk to coals, a faint red behind gray ash. He knelt, added kindling, then 2 small logs. The flame took slowly, licking back to life. Smoke climbed in thin lines toward the roof. He set the fish near the stove, their scales catching the light, and cleaned one for soup. The smell came mild and clean. Salt, water, a few slices of potato. He ate close to the stove, the bowl warm between his hands. Outside, the wind began again, brushing snow against the door. He listened to it while he chewed, not in thought, just aware of it. When the bowl was empty, he set it aside, fed the fire one more piece of wood, and watched it catch. The light flickered steady across the room. The day was over.